hobby channel, and this is part 1 of my how to build Fangorn Forest board tutorial. So I'll be talking through some of the things that you need and looking at a plan, an outline of the plan for the board. So maybe we will start with talking about budgets. I think by the time this board is done, I'll have spent in the region of 200 to 250 euro. Obviously you could spend a lot more, and you could probably spend a little less depending on what you wanted on your board. For me, I'm gonna go with quite a few trees, which is gonna knock my budget up quite a bit, and I have resin on the board, so again that's a little bit more expensive, having a resin water feature. So if you kind of were happy with as many trees, I think, and no resin features, you could probably do it a lot cheaper. Now, when I say 250 euro as a budget for the board itself, I had a lot of this stuff lying around anyway, so I mean the biggest expense for me is going to be the trees. I have some of the materials anyway, like flocks and things like that, and even the board that I'm going to be making, half of that board is going to be butchered from a previous project that I didn't really like, but I'll talk about that a little bit further on in the video. Right now I'm just going to talk about some of the things that you're going to need to make your board. Right, so we'll start off with, I guess, flocks. Now I got a lot of flocks here. I bought them kind of secondhand, so they were pretty cheap. Some of the colors that are a bit funky, I'm just gonna paint over. I'll be using them as a texture mostly. I mean, I'm not going to be putting red on the board, but I might kind of stick it down and paint over it and kind of dry brush over it later. So yeah, if you also want to use a kind of a basing technique, sand is pretty good. So you can put sand on your board instead of flocks. In that first stage. I mean, flock usually comes later. And then I have some static grass. That can be a bit of a pain in the ass. I don't really have an applicator, and I don't know if I'm going to be using an applicator on this project. A static applicator to make it kind of stand up and make it really cool, but it would be great to have something like that. I also got some of this. These are kind of cool. So this is like long wheat grass from Woodland Scenics. So I'll be using that for like the outskirts and kind of the barren parts of the board. It's kind of hair-like. So if you imagine kind of snipping that and kind of putting it into little tufts. So that's cool. I'm looking forward to using that. I have already used it on some models and things like that. So that is a lot of the flocks that I'll be using. Kind of just basic, sawdust flock and grass. Here I have an interesting piece. It's like an aquarium wood, but I was thinking of buying a couple of these because I'm very into aquariums. So I have some kind of, these kind of look like nearly armatures, but you'd have to use your imagination to kind of make them into trees, but they can work as kind of fallen trees, I guess, as well. So I might get a couple more of those before the end of the project and kind of throw them around the board. They're kind of cool. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is various types of glues. So you can have kind of your basic glue that you're going to need for sticking things down, for basing onto the board, is going to be PVA. It's not very expensive, but you're going to be using a lot of it. I'm probably going to need more. You can have some super glue to stick, certain parts down a little bit more. And what I'm also going to do is make some sealant when I'm finished kind of putting the flock down with the PVA, and a sealant would be just a watered down version in a spray bottle, and you kind of just mist it over the board to kind of harden and keep some of the flocks in place, so that you know, when you're moving it around, it doesn't kind of keep falling off and keep kind of coming off. You're gonna need brushes, a lot of crappy brushes to apply your PVA and your paint. These are really cheap, inexpensive, not so great brushes that are up to abuse, and they're big, but you can use when you're painting big spaces on your board. I'd also suggest just kind of using, like, you know, paint brushes that you get in a hardware shop. So don't be using any of your model brushes, because that would be disastrous. And I do have a couple of small ones for finer points. Then you're going to need paint. So when you're painting your board, again, get something industrial and a lot of quantity. I got this bitter chocolate color, which I really like, from the hardware shop, and it's kind of a greyish brown, because I want to do my Fangorn forest, my edge of Fangorn forest, with a kind of greyish brown, because I think that'd be cool. And then I got some more kind of vibrant browns here in spray cans. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to end up basing most of the board, so I won't be spray painting the board in its base color. I'll actually be painting it, which is going to take a little time because I like this color so much. If you can get the color that you want as a base color in a spray can, I suggest you do that. I just couldn't, so I'll be painting on that, and I'll be doing kind of the tree areas in a more kind of vibrant brown, in a more kind of lifelike kind of brown. So I'll be spraying some of it, but actually I'll be painting a lot of the board. So that'll take a while. And just a little bit of black spray paint in case I come across large kind of rock areas or something that I want to do slightly different color. You need tape. Tape always comes in handy. A little bit of filler. Filler is great for doing rock work again, and just filling in bits of your board with texture if you want to give it a bit of a different texture. You're going to need a knife. Now, if you want, and you want to stick a load of money into the budget to build this board, you could get a hot foam cutter, and I'd recommend that. I'm not going to be using one this time, but in the future I probably will. For now, I'm just going to use a knife, because a lot of the elements that I'm going to be making for this board they're not very tricky. I'll be making a couple of hills, and I'll probably get away with just using a straight up Stanley knife, and then pliers for twisting and squeezing stuff. You'll also need two. Well, you could get one. You'll need fiberboard and aero board, or foam or extruded polystyrene, to make the elements of the board, and I'll show you what I mean. So this is the previous board that and I'll give you a better look at this. This is the previous board that I am converting to be half of my Fangorn board. So instead of just starting from scratch, I'm using half of the board to kind of, I guess, give me a little head start, because it was from a project that I didn't really like. So if you look here, the base of the board is just fiberboard. So I'll need to get another one of those, and it's relatively inexpensive. I think I paid like €6 for that. And then the board itself is aero board. So there's probably better versions of kind of polystyrene or foam that you could get. This happens to be the most popular foam in my region, I guess. But you can see I've started to paint the board the base color that I want for the whole project, really. And it looks pretty good, and it takes a dry brush in here. It takes a dry brush in really well. You can see that I was messing around with some grasses to see how they look, some sparse grasses and some little kind of those long grass wheat kind of things. And here I'm gonna have some kind of karst landscape, a little bit more kind of karst, I guess, and small hills and things like that. But a lot of this build is going to be modular as well. So you'll be able to move things around. Now when I paint over all this, obviously it's going to look a lot better, but you can see some of the textures that I'm going for. And this kind of quadrant of the board is probably not finished, but it's close to what it's going to look like. And the dice box there, which I think is quite sharp. So that is the first part of the tutorial. Just our materials needed, talking a little bit about the kind of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But also, when I was planning the board, I kind of figured that to cover a 4x3 space with model trees, like in an entirely or even halfway, that'd be expensive. So what I've kind of ended up converting the project into is not Fangorn itself, but a kind of a Fangorn's Forest Edge, and the board is going to have, I'd say the board itself on a 5 or a 4x3 board is going to be maybe a third trees. That's what I'm aiming for. So it's not going to be like a full board of trees, because while that might look cool, firstly, number one, it would be way too expensive. Because I think trees are going to be really expensive, and I'm kind of going to pull the stops out with the trees. But also, number two, I don't think it would play very well with the game. And from my experience in my last board making project, I want it to play really well. And trees are something that you have to get right with the spacing and the kind of aesthetic. Otherwise, when you're playing on it, it might look cool, but it might be crap to play on. So that's why I'm going to go with a kind of a very modular build with the trees, so that they're kind of movable and you can kind of find something decent to play around with. Alright, so that's part one of my tutorial, and please tune in for part two, which is going to be the outline of the plan of the board, and I will see you then. Alright, thanks for watching, and subscribe and leave a comment. Bye bye.